Hello and welcome to MRCPsych on the Go Revision Essentials. My name is Dr. Alapasurliker and I'm a psychiatry trainee in the west of Scotland. Like many of you, I spent a lot of time commuting. This was valuable time that I could have spent revising for the MRCPsych examination. And so, I've started this podcast to help you revise on the go. Each episode breaks down one high-yield topic mapped to the syllabus. This is then followed by 5 questions to help reinforce your learning. So, grab your headphones, turn travel time into revision time, and let's get started. A special thank you to Dr. Vinnie Murphy, one of our listeners, for the excellent suggestion to highlight key exam points with a sound cue. From now on, you will hear a short chime, like this, before key exam points, so listen out for these high-yield moments. In this episode, we are building directly on classical and operant conditioning. We are focusing on 4 very examinable concepts that explain why learned behaviours, especially fear and anxiety, spread and persist over time. Let's start with generalisation and discrimination. These were ideas first described by Pavlov. Generalisation occurs when a learned response spreads beyond the original stimulus to similar stimuli. If fear becomes attached to one situation, it can begin to spread. For example, someone has a panic attack in a lift. Soon, they begin to fear all lifts, then other enclosed spaces, and then crowded rooms. Over time, the range of feared situation widens. This spread is called generalisation. Clinically, this explains why phobias rarely stay contained. The avoidance broadens and functioning narrows. Discrimination is the opposite process. Discrimination occurs when the learned response remains specific to the original stimuli and does not spread. For example, a dog conditioned to salivate to one particular bell tone may respond only to that exact tone and not to other similar sounds. In therapy, we often aim to reduce overgeneralization and strengthen discrimination. The goal is precision. The fear linked to real threat and not to everything that resembles it. For the exam, let's keep it clear. Generalization explains spread and discrimination explains specificity. Next, let's look at secondary reinforcement, which was proposed by Skinner. But before that, let's define primary reinforcement. A primary reinforcer is inherently rewarding because it meets a biological need such as food, water, warmth or sleep. No learning is required. Then a secondary reinforcer starts as neutral but becomes reinforcing through association with a primary reinforcer. A classic example of this is money. It has no biological value on its own, but it becomes powerful because of what it represents and what it can obtain. In psychiatry, secondary reinforcement often explains why behaviours persist. Take avoidance and anxiety. The immediate reduction in anxiety is negative reinforcement. But there may also be second reinforcers operating quietly in the background. For example, increased attention from family, reassurance from clinicians, or relief from work. Even when anxiety improves, these indirect benefits can maintain this behaviour. These secondary reinforcers can unintentionally maintain symptoms and make behaviours harder to change. In exam questions, look carefully for subtle gains. If the behaviour continues because of attention, sympathy, or reduced demands, that points towards secondary reinforcement. Now, let's move on to incubation. Hans Eysenck, a German-born British psychologist, introduced this concept to explain a paradox. You may remember his name from the Eysenck Personality Inventory. If you've ever completed a personality questionnaire in medical school or during training, there's a good chance his work was behind this. In classical conditioning, if a conditioned stimulus is presented repeatedly without the unconditioned stimulus, extinction should occur. The fear should reduce. But in clinical practice, we often see the opposite. For example, if a person has a traumatic experience involving a dog, They often avoid dogs completely. Months later, their fear is stronger and not weaker. This is incubation. The avoidance prevents exposure, and without exposure, extinction cannot occur. The feared stimulus is never reevaluated. Instead, the fear remains unchallenged and can intensify. Incubation is particularly relevant in phobias, PTSD, and avoidance-based anxiety disorder. It helps to explain why doing nothing does not solve the problem. In fact, avoidance can make things worse. And finally, we come to stimulus preparedness, which was introduced by psychologist Martin Seligman, who is best known for his work on learned helplessness. This is a theory we will come back to in future episodes. Stimulus preparedness refers to the idea that humans are biologically predisposed to learn certain associations more easily than others. Some fears are acquired rapidly and are resistant to extinction because they had survival value. Common examples can include fear of snakes, spiders, and heights. We do not commonly see phobias of plucked sockets of flowers, even though both can be harmful in certain contexts. Prepared stimuli are learned quickly and extinguish slowly. This helps to explain why certain phobias are more common across cultures and others are rare. At this point, it is useful to briefly connect this to escape and avoidance. Escape behaviour occurs when someone leaves a situation to reduce anxiety that is already present. Avoidance behaviour occurs when someone prevents anxiety by not entering that situation at all. Both are maintained through negative reinforcement, and anxiety reduces in the short term. This short-term relief then prevents extinction and over time contributes to generalisation and incubation. However, we will return to escape and avoidance conditioning in more detail in the next episode. Now, let's test your recall. As always, I will read out 5 exam-style questions. After each one, I will pause for 10 seconds so you can have a go at answering this yourself before hearing the answer. Question 1. Fear spreading from lifts to all enclosed spaces is best explained by what concept? And the answer is generalisation. Question 2. A patient's panic symptoms have reduced, but they continue to avoid work because they receive increased care and reassurance from family members. This maintenance of behaviour is best described by what? The answer is secondary reinforcement. Question number 3. Worsening of fear over time, despite avoidance, is known as what? The answer is incubation. Question number 4. A child develops an intense fear of snakes after a single encounter, whereas repeat negative experience with flowers do not produce a phobia. Which concept best explains this difference? The answer is stimulus preparedness. And finally, we move on to question 5. Learning to fear only one specific stimulus and not similar ones reflect what process? And the answer is discrimination. So well done if you paused and thought the questions through, because that is exactly how to prepare for this exam. So let's summarise what we have learned today. All 4 concepts explained today further explain why anxiety disorders are persistent and difficult to shift. In simple terms, generalisation spreads fear, secondary reinforcement maintains behaviour, incubation strengthens fear through avoidance, and stimulus preparedness makes certain fears easier to acquire and harder to extinguish. Once you see how these mechanisms interact, clinical presentations start to make more sense, and exam vignettes become much easier to unpack. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of MRCpsych on the Go Revision Essentials. I hope this episode helped to move your revision forward. If you have any questions or just want to continue the discussion, you can find me on LinkedIn at MRCpsych on the Go, spelled MRCPsych on the Go. This podcast is about making revision accessible. If you found it useful, liking and sharing it with others helps the goal more than anything else. That's it for today. I'm Dr. Alapazurlikar, and as always, keep revising on the go.